Welcome back to the RGR Football Channel, everybody. My name is Daniel Harms, your film analyst. We have a little bit of a different schedule today. Not going to have a film room for you as I'm on vacation, but instead I have a fantastic guest for you. You guys all know and love the Athletic Football Show, one of my favorite podcasts. Robert Mays, the host and showrunner of that football show, is here with me today. Let's go ahead and shift gears right now to the defense. Man, I know he was your defensive player of the year pick last year, but how good is Chris Jones? This is entering his 20. He 29 years old now. Just what he did last year, just incredible. So I just want to hear what you have to say on the defensive. I also agree he was probably my defensive player of the year in Chris Jones. How do you feel, man?
I just think that there's a tier of defensive players up front that affect the game in just such a different way than everyone else. And to me, it's still those front four players. I think those are still the most
Yeah.
valuable defensive players in the league on a year-to-year basis, just in terms of what they're doing to change a game down in and down out. And it's Aaron Donald, it's Nick Bosa, it's Micah Parsons, it's Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, I think is probably right in that discussion. And Chris Jones is right there. Like, he's just a special defensive player. He's just the sort of defensive player that you can build an entire unit around. You look at the group that they had last year, it's not filled with stars. They made a lot of bets on younger players. They spent some money in the secondary and going to get Justin Reed and things like that. But for the most part, I mean, this is just a solid but unspectacular group of defensive players. I think that's actually a smart way to do it when you have Patrick Mahomes and the guys you have on offense. But that just puts such an onus on Chris Jones to play like a superstar consistently. And man, did he. I mean, just what he does every single game, despite all of the attention that's given to him, despite all of the doubles, despite the center sliding his way pretty much every single play, and he's still showing up for you and controlling games in the biggest moments. And that's what truly elite players do. They just make sure that no matter what you're going to do to them, you cannot fully take them out of the game. And he is that sort of player. And I just thought that he was so central to the team that they were last year, and honestly, the team they've been over the last few years.
Yeah, their defense, it really is focused around them. A lot of fans and some analysts have brought up the idea of trading away Chris Jones. But if you do that, not only are you counting on the cap space and the capital that you get back to produce in some way, shape, or form to that, you have to account for what Chris Jones does for everybody else. He creates one-on-ones for your defensive ends. He creates one-on-ones for your blitzers and gaps for your blitzers. And that's something that Steve Spagnuolo loves to do. He wants to bring, Nick Bolton downhill. He wants to bring L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie off the edge. And if he can create some interior gravity, we've talked about, a lot of people talk about defensive gravity and offensive gravity, things like that. If he can bring gravity to the middle of that offensive line, someone's coming free and someone's getting a one-on-one. So what Chris Jones doing this past year, actually getting better as a run defender as well. He gets a lot of knocks from people saying that he's not a very good run defender, much like Aaron Donald has gotten some of the same shape. But if you're a quick penetrator, sometimes you're going to hit those players in the backfield and sometimes you're not. But I think Chris Jones did a fantastic job last year of penetrating and then just kind of waiting, keeping his head on the swivel and actually getting those tackles for losses. And it was a really great job of him just kind of being there for everybody. He was out there a lot more than he usually is as well. So he was playing a lot of snaps, just getting out there and just consistently being someone you can always count on. So he was so fantastic. And, we talk about now Steve Spagnuolo. many Chiefs fans, especially in our comments and our mentions, that have over the years were asked for Steve Spagnuolo's job, essentially. Like, that they've called for it many times because a lot of times we see the defense come out of the gates pretty slow. And I know that you and Nate Tice have consistently talked about this, but they always seem to get better. Always after the bye, they have all that information. They take it, they digest it, and they just throw it to their defense saying, we know this is what you do best, and we're going to stick to this. And they always get better throughout the season. So after they had such notable improvement with those 5 rookies contributing last year, how do you feel that they're positioning themselves with this defense going forward under Steve Spagnuolo to get even better?
I think that they're in such a good spot for a few different reasons. They've been blitzing less. They blitzed less last year, and teams in general around the NFL are blitzing less. I think that they don't want to give other teams the opportunity to kind of throw those haymakers against those pressure looks and create explosive plays. And if we're going to see less of that, then you need better players up front. And look at what they did this offseason, the way they invested. First round pick, you get Charles Omenihu. So just, I think that the version of the defense that they're stepping into makes a lot of sense given kind of where the league is and where they want to be. And I just think that Steve Spagnuolo was a perfect defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, because if you know you're going to be in the playoffs every single year based on the strength of your offense, what you need first and foremost, I think, is a defensive coordinator who is going to create specific matchups within the playoffs that puts you in a good position, where you have a guy that's willing to be extreme and kind of has these great plans tailored to the teams that you're going to play in the playoffs. And that's exactly what Steve Spagnuolo does. And I think that there was a time when the type of defense that they were playing was right, because it was all pressure all the time. And they were just going to say, all right, we don't mind giving up these gashes because we know our offense is going to be able to score in 2 plays. So as long as we get them the ball back, it was like a pressing defense. So I just think his ability to kind of shape shift, given this restraints and given the obligations placed on him because of the way that they want to play and how their offense plays, it makes him the right guy. And I think that he has shown that time in and time out.
Yeah, I think that myself, I've gone back on some of my Steve Spagnuolo talk, and just specifically stylistically, I wanted him to have a little bit more defensive ends that aren't just the collapse the pocket type of guys, which is one of my bigger problems. I like to see some more athletic and speed guys, and they just drafted Felix Anudike-Uzomah in the first round this past season. I think Joe Cullen had a little bit of an input on the defensive end being selected there, and that's also one of the dynamics that I really loved about this past year. We saw the Chiefs go from just having to always collapse the pocket to George Karlaftis is going to come play defensive tackle. He's going to play nose guard on some of these pass rush situations. And Chris, you're going to go to the outside, or they're going to bring in Mike Dana. I remember specifically you and Nate talking about why is Mike Dana on the field on these third downs against the Bengals in the regular season? He was getting destroyed in the run game, which, yeah, it did happen a little bit. But I think they worked that out in the regular season to use it best in the postseason to really get those one-on-ones and pass situations. And at the end of the day, what Steve Spagnuolo and Joe Cullen did, I think, last year is going to not only shape the defense going forward, but it's going to probably give Patrick Mahomes maybe the best defense he's ever had behind him. I do think that with this young group that they have, they could be the best defense Mahomes has ever had. And how does that impact this team in the grand scape of the NFL going forward?
I think it just gives you more flexibility. It just gives you more different ways to win games. Can you win a game 21-17 in a way that you couldn't a few years ago? And I think the answer becomes yes. Can you focus a little bit more on the run games? The offense needs to be a little bit less productive. And when you're trying to win championships, that's what matters, right? It's just having as many different avenues as possible to winning football games. And I think that's what it gives them. And I don't think it's crazy at all to think that they could have that. They drafted more defensive backs this year. They consistently are just refueling that position. Even a guy like Brian Cook, who was a rookie last year, you'd imagine all of those players in the secondary take a step forward. This is my favorite defensive line I think that they've ever had with this group. I think because, like you mentioned, there was a lot of, I'll never be able to pronounce his name. His last name starts with a K, or like the Breland Speaks era, where you have these guys who are just a little bit of a different
Passano.
Ton of Passano, yes. And those guys who are in that like 275, 280 range, and those are the body types that they were going for. That's no longer the case. I mean, they want Charles Omenihu playing defensive tackle on 3rd and 7. So I just think that type of defense is just going to be so fun to watch. The speed and explosiveness that I think they now have top to bottom at every single level, what they have at linebacker. I mean, I'm really, really excited about it. And again, I just think it gives you more opportunities to win games. In the rare chance that Patrick Mahomes has a down game in some divisional round game against the Bengals, like maybe you can slow them down more than you would have in years past, even if I don't think that's going to happen very often.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. I think what we're seeing right now with the differences on offense, how they've adapted, like you said, it goes hand in hand with what the defense has done. And the chameleon aspects that they have, which I really underappreciated Steve Spagnuolo for. Like you were talking about how in 2008, in 2019, 2020-ish era, where they were just bombs away, Steve Spagnuolo was blitzing a ton. Like he was just like, I'm going all out. And then they've changed a little bit to that aspect. They got better against the run last year, which is something a lot of Chiefs fans has also been calling for, just to get better at the run. And they did that last year. And I love the compliment that they've kind of understood. They're like, we're not going to be always looking for corners that are going to be shut down guys. Trent McDuffie fell to them and they were like, okay, we're going to take Trent McDuffie because he's a really good player. But last year, Josh Williams, Jalen Watson, this year with Shamari Connor, they've got guys that fit exactly what they want. It feels like they've identified those corner and those positional guys that they want to have a lot of versatility. They, the Rashad Fentons of the world. And even before that with Kendall Fuller, where they have these corners that play safety or slot corner or out wide. They have a lot of different guys that can do many different things that they're asked of them. So when you identify how you want to attack the cornerback position and then you hit on some of those players, it really gives your defensive coordinator, your defensive line a little bit of breathing room. Just one last question for you. Trent McDuffie last year started the season off hurt. And he came in and it feels like he kind of flew under the radar for some of those top corners. Sauce Gardner took the headlines. Tariq Woolen played great in Seattle. Do you think that Trent McDuffie can not only take a step forward this year in this defense, but become like a L'Jarius Sneed kind of player who's, I believe, underrated in the NFL, but as close to a lockdown-ish corner in this defense that you can get?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think that, again, when you start your rookie season off hurt, you're just behind the eight ball so far. And the fact that he was able to come in the middle of the year and become like a real contributor down the stretch, also play multiple positions, just what they asked him to do, I think is pretty impressive for a young cornerback. So I think that there's absolutely a world where he becomes like a high level player at the position for several years, over the course of this rookie deal, because he showed a lot of flashes in year one. And, we've seen corners that end up becoming really good players in the league that can barely get on the field as rookies, or when they are on the field, they really, really struggle. And that was not the case with Trent McDuffie. So I think that if they eventually move on from L'Jarius Sneed, which feels like they will, just because when you've invested as much as they have in other players in the draft and, you're running out of expendable income elsewhere, that's the type of thing where you have a succession plan. I think that McDuffie could potentially be that kind of pivotal piece for them that can play a bunch of different spots in the secondary like Sneed has for them over the last couple of years.
Yeah, you touched on a soft spot for us Chiefs fans. We love L'Jarius Sneed, but at the end of the day, you have to kind of weigh that future position with maybe getting some draft capital back on someone that you may already have a plan in place for. So thank you very much for your time. This was a fantastic talk. I hope all of you got a lot of information out of it, because at the end of the day, we all want the Chiefs to succeed. They go back to the Super Bowl. I think that they've put themselves in a position with their defense, with their offense continuing to get better. The offensive line, we'll see how that works out this year. I'm excited to see what Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor look like as tackle. So I hope again that you guys enjoyed the conversation with Robert. Thank you again very much for your time. I love getting to hear you guys on your podcast. So getting to talk to you and have a little bit of a one-on-one with you was a fantastic time. I would appreciate everybody. Please go listen to the Athletic Football Show. If you don't, it is by far my favorite football podcast and one of the best out there. So do that. Subscribe to their work as much as you guys can. We will be back with you guys as soon as possible. I'm not entirely sure when this video release, probably Wednesday, if this is a Wednesday. So make sure you guys are hitting that the sub for the channel, and continue with the RGR channel. You guys, we'll see you guys next time. Have a great day.